Would a rose by any other name smell as sweet? What if we didn't call it a rose? On this episode of Garden Time, we talk about plant names. We discuss why we use Latin in naming plants and some of the weirdest common names we could find. We're talking plants and taking names on this episode of Garden Time. Garden Time is brought to you by Capital Subaru in Salem, Oregon.
At Capital Subaru, we value your time, whether you're here for service or working with our amazing sales team. Everything is right here for your convenience. We offer a great selection of Subarus, an industry-leading service center that keeps you moving, and so much more. Like our living green wall, just one of the many features throughout our dealership. Looking for the perfect pet gift? Check out Happy Paws Pet Shop right here in our lobby. Or plan your next adventure in our fireside seating and find your happy place. It's always your time at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.
Welcome to the Garden Time Podcast. We're based in the Pacific Northwest of the United States in a Zone 8 region. This zone deals with plants that can survive in 10 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. I'm producer Jeff Gustin with your hosts Judy Elaruzo and Ryan Seeley. Welcome to Garden Time. And today we're all sitting and we have our computers out and we're at Al's Garden and Home in Sherwood as a backdrop because we're going to talk about what's in a name. If you've been to a garden center, you know that there are specific common names, but a lot of times there are Latin names. And we're going to talk about the reason why there's Latin names and how maddening and it makes things easier for the growers and for the retailers sometimes, but it's maddening as well. So first of all, why Latin? How did plants come to be named in Latin?
Right, Latin, it started back in the 18th century. And so it was founded by, it's called a binomial. It's a two-name system, and it was that we use today. And it was invented by Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus in the 18th century. And it gives us each plant having its own unique name to kind of get rid of the confusion. So it means that wherever you are in the world and whatever language you speak, you'll be able to identify a plant and communicate with other growers.
But why Latin?
Because Latin is a dead language.
So no changes.
And it's neutral.
It's neutral, and there is no changes.
So the Latin names, so I know genus. Mm-hmm. So it's genus?
There's genus, and then there's species,
okay.
And then cultivar, which is the cultivated version of that genus and species. And you can back up farther if you want to into families and phylums and all of that. But as far as the Latin names go, it's typically genus, then the species, and then the cultivar.
Right. And if you think about it, when you look way back, people didn't have two names. It was like Carl's son, or Carl the carpenter or whatever, and then it became too confusing, like which Carl or whatever. And so plants, I think it became like that too.
Yeah,
which geranium or which maple
rose.
Tree, which rose. Yeah.
Right. So the genus, it typically starts with a capital letter, and it represents a group of plants with similar characteristics. So it's kind of looking back at its ancestry and shares these common characteristics with ancestries, kind of like we do with people, but that's where the plant names kind of come into that, is how it relates to each other and its commonalities.
Right.
So what's the benefits of having a Latin name?
It's less confusion for the industry. I don't think for customers so much, because we don't want them to feel like they don't know what they want, but we want to make sure as industry, as professional people in the industry, that they're getting what they want. So it's like you want to say, like burning bush we were talking about. There might be a couple different burning bushes. So which one do you want? Because they're very different. So we just want to make sure the customer's getting what they want.
Yeah. So it's kind of important to know both. So on the grower side of things, in a world that's propagating plants, they need to know kind of the heritage and the genealogy per se of these plants, what the parentage is, because that tells them how these plants perform, and their hardiness to their habits and things like that. And so those, make sure those are there. But as the lay person or the person that's the average gardener that doesn't know Latin and doesn't really want to know.
Don't care.
They want to know Latin or care.
Sure.
They're going off of a common name. So I think it's important that as a nursery or a garden center, you kind of have to know both, because you can't just assume that You can't put one aside and not pay attention to that and only pay attention to one. You need to be able to meld those two together.
Right. And I think too, people move around a lot now, so they might be living in North Carolina and now they're in Oregon, and it's like they're looking for a plant and they're calling it one thing, and it's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
right.
So you really have to kind of ask those 20 questions. It's like, what color is it, or what does it do? Or
Well, you were talking about having smartphones now, because
Yeah.
people now can come in and you say burning bush. Well, what are you talking about? You
Right.
can actually call it up on your smartphone,
that helps.
which helps out a lot.
Right.
We were talking earlier about there was at a garden center somebody working the help desk, and I don't want to say that they're plant snobs, but there are. And somebody came in and they said they wanted butterfly bush, and she goes, "I'm not sure what you're talking about," and it's because she was a snob and loved the name Buddleia. And so until that person, oh, you must be talking about Buddleia, which kind of is intimidating to
Well, sure.
somebody that's coming in buying a plant. So are there benefits to having the common name? Does that kind of get you in the ballpark,
Yeah.
or
It does.
is it-
You can narrow it down a lot of times with the with the common name. Like you said, a burning bush. That could be a euonymus. Euonymus a lot of compacta is considered burning bush because it has that fire engine red foliage in the fall. But a nandina or a barberry or berberis, all go by burning bush because they have that red foliage. So you can kind of get to kind of the same ballpark, but those are three very distinctly
different.
different plants. So unless you know that when you're coming in asking for a burning bush what you have in your mind, you could be leaving with something that is sure a burning bush, but it could be entirely different than what you're actually looking for.
not the one you want.
So these were scientific names that came up, so it helped people identify. But this was long before we had DNA. So, I mean, how did they come up with the Latin names? Was it the leaf structure? Was it bloom structure? Was it plant structure? All of that? How did they find these families?
Right. I think there is a lot when you break down. This is going back to
To your botany.
many years ago classes of.
Yeah, we don't want to hear from any professors that were
Yeah,
doing
no,
this.
I'm pretty sure I passed that class, but that was.
Yeah.
I won't tell you how many years ago. But you break down each individual plant, and you're technically supposed to be able to identify any plant by breaking down the structure of its stem, and its leaf, and its flower.
Yeah.
So as opposed to opposing leaves, which are directly across from
Right.
each other,
Right.
alternating leaves, which are
There's
stair-step.
right,
Right.
and there's opposite, there's
Yeah.
ovate, there's
And those all became part of that classification.
Exactly.
Right.
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 Yeah.
So what
and then,
happened?
and then flower type
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
also
flowers, yeah.
it was the main distinction of just because you may get two plants that are in the same genus that look very different. It's like, why are these together? But when you break it down far enough, it comes
Right.
down a lot of times to the flower.
Right, like euphorbia. Euphorbia can be an outdoor plant, it could be a tropical plant, and it's the poinsettia. But it goes down, a poinsettia has those beautiful bracts, but it's those little tiny flowers that are identical to the shrub or the perennial that we put in the garden.
Right.
That's also a euphorbia because the flowers are the same.
Interesting. And they can crossbreed too. is
Yes.
Within the same
Yes.
genus, you can do that.
Right.
And then you get the next name, which is the the species.
Right.
So you take anything like a rose, can be crossed with another rose, which makes a
Right.
brand new rose.
Right, because
Right.
there's like Rosa rugosas
Right.
and Rosa
Yeah.
this and Rosa that, and it's how it's crossed from the parentage to what the next iteration will
Right,
be.
because you can't really do like a maple tree and a rose. You can't cross them because they're not in the same genus, they're not in the same family, so that's how plants that are closer together or in the same genus or same family can be crossed.
So,
But that's a whole other story.
I was just going to say, so now we have genetics. And so plants can be classified now by their genome and figuring out which families, which is causing some problems.
Oh, man.
It is. It's
No, well, not problems. I was just saying,
No.
not
clarity.
problems, but
Yeah.
there is, the more science evolves and that we're getting into things, plants are getting reclassified.
Oh my gosh.
So what we've learned it has always gone by, and Judy, you were just telling me this
Oh my
a little bit ago, Hebe is now considered Veronica.
Veronica.
And rosemary is now a salvia. That's hot off the press. I didn't even know that.
But it's been a while.
Yeah.
It's
But
been
it
like
has
10
been.
years.
Right. And salvia is a massive genus with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of
many.
varieties in there. So it gets to be frustrating as a consumer that's okay, what am I calling this? Am I coming into the garden center looking for a rosemary, or am I asking for a Veronica?
Right. Yeah.
And when I ask for this, what is that nice garden center staff going to go take me to?
Right.
Because do they know the changes?
That's true.
Right, because there's not like there's one all-knowing publication that comes out in your email once a week saying, hey, everybody in the world, this is now this.
Right.
Right, so this information just kind of trickles out, but if you didn't read about it, do you know?
Right. No, it's so true. It is so true. And it's like, and then how do we embrace it as an industry?
Right.
And sometimes we just say, oh, we're not calling it that. We just get kind of snuffy about it. And it's like, we're not going to do it. And it's like, because it's too hard. We all grew up with this name, or we already have it in our catalogs. We have the tags. It gets economical. It's
Right.
like we can't change everything every time somebody comes up with another research project.
Right. And I've worn, in my 25 plus years in the industry, worn a few different hats. I've been on the, the retail garden center side of things. I've been on the wholesale grower side of things. And now I'm, more in a, consulting kind of thing, working with retailers and wholesale and in between. And there is definitely a difference in mentality when you think about this. So, being on the garden center side of things, you get, the homeowners that are coming in that don't, aren't reading, the journals coming out talking about all the new name changes, and they're asking for it. But then on the grower side of things that may be listening to these and seeing these, we need to change the name now, that can be kind of a big deal. Because like you're talking about, it's like, okay, we've grown into this for many years, but we have all of these tags, we have all of this inventory, but what is the consumer going to be asking for? So if we do go and change this, have we just lost our consumer base that they don't know what that is? And so it's a fine line of how do you change it, and nobody's policing it.
Right.
And it goes beyond just printing new tags.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you can change mayonnaise and call it mustard, but people are still going to come in looking
Right.
at mayonnaise, and
Right.
they're going to look for that name that says mayonnaise.
Right.
And it's kind of the same with this. It could be a barberry, it could be berberis. But if that's not what they're used to purchasing,
Right.
now the retailer's in this bind about what they have to buy, what they have to inventory, and what the consumer calls it and what the consumer
Right.
wants.
Right.
So
And just because you might name it that,
Does
the
anybody
nursery
else?
down the
Right.
street might not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, case in point. Okay, Mahonia is the state flower of Oregon.
Oregon grape.
And the governor's mansion is called Mahonia Hall. And like 25 years ago, they changed. Mahonia is now a berberis.
Right.
And nobody uses it. We didn't rename the governor's
No,
hall. We
no.
didn't rename the state flower.
Right.
So it goes to the point. It's like it's generally known as, and it's like I don't see it ever changing.
Yeah.
But do you get in a different part of the country that doesn't have
Yeah, I don't
that
know.
where you go East Coast?
I wonder.
That's where you have Mahonia's big presence on the West Coast, where you get East Coast where they can grow Mahonias, but I think you'll see more them calling it berberis.
I'll have to call. Or
over
you know anybody out
that.
there?
And
Give
that
them
brings up a
buzz.
whole thing, because we did a garden time tour once, and we were up in Victoria, and they kept on talking about
Gary Oak.
Gary Oaks, and we're like going, what's a Gary Oak? And then we figured out it was the Oregon white oak, which is what we call it here.
Right.
Up there, they go more towards the Latin name. And so it was very confusing, because they were saying Gary Oak this, Gary Oak
Right.
that, and we're like going, that's a white oak. We know.
Right.
Yeah, like,
It was funny.
but it does bring up to the point that the common name, that you really kind of have to lean towards the consumer and what they're calling it. I
Right.
mean, when sneezeweed was named sneezeweed, it was named that for a reason, because it made people sneeze. It was either too much pollen or fragrant or whatever. But that common name could mean a lot of different things now. But it still can be called that name.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
so funny.
So I think it's important as to, if you're on the breeding side and the growing side of things, you do need to know the Latin botanical names, because that's where your parentage comes from and how you're crossing things, and to follow the path, because you don't want just crossing and making up everything. So you do need some
Right. Oh, sure.
some definite consistency
Definitely.
and uniformity. So
Right.
if you go to a garden center here in Sherwood, Oregon, and ask for Acer rubrum red sunset, and you go to a nursery in the East Coast or in Australia or in England, and you ask for Acer rubrum red sun, that will be the same plant anywhere in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you go ask for a red maple, that has leads open to a
Right,
little
right. No, that's so
interpretation.
true. That is so true.
Yeah.
So there's another thing that we've run up against in names, and that's series. So a lot of times a grower will grow, say, a camellia, and we have some camellias here, and it'll be a Camellia Yuletide, but they'll rename it and put it as part of a series. They'll call it Christmas Camellia in the holiday series of plants. So when you, as a consumer, you go to the garden center, knowing that Latin will tell you whether that plant is the same one that you already have in your garden or whether
Right.
It's something altogether new, right?
True. Yeah, that's
Right.
true. Yep.
Right, because you may have one grower that likes, and that's been pretty popular in the last,
Right.
10 years or so, is kind of getting into the fun naming game
Yeah.
of plants. Because,
Right.
the Latin names, there's really nothing.
It's not a marketing
It's
thing.
nothing fun and sexy about it. It's not what's dragging that consumer
Right,
into the
right.
garden center to buy it. But, if you put down there as like, a really fun, cool
Margarita Sunset.
There
Right,
you go.
yeah,
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 you can just,
right?
you can just picture
chick
it.
charms,
Yeah,
right?
chick charms.
It
Chick
would be an
charms.
example of that.
Sunset.
It's a sempervirens, that's come up with, chick charms key lime pie or
Right.
Yeah.
mint marble. Well, that's really not the plant name. The plant name would be semperviren, rubicon or
Right.
whatever it is. It's just not as sexy as,
Yeah.
mint marble is.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But and knowing those plant names, knowing the Latin will help you as a homeowner, because once you know that Latin name, you will also have more ties to the conditions it grows in, the type of plant family it's from, whether it's hardy or not for your area, as opposed to a cute name like Margarita Sunset
Right.
or
Right.
whatever. You will actually know. Or Tequila Sunrise. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I don't know why it's.
Yeah,
Margarita's
apparently
on your
drinks
brain.
on your mind. Yeah.
But knowing those Latin names, even just the genus, that will go a long way to helping the homeowner,
Right.
correct?
Right.
And there are a lot in the Latin names that are used that are descriptive terms as to what that plant will do, how it performs, its growth habit, its shape, or its color. So, for instance, if you see the word alba in a plant name, alba is white. So regardless of what you see, it's going to be either like a white flower or a white bloom.
Right, and that's would be the species.
Yeah.
Right.
So the genus would stay, but the second word would be that alba.
Right. And you get into, a lot of them are colors like alba or rubra
Right.
or for red or verde for green.
So, Brian, you brought up, talking about what the Latin can signify. But as you both know, we have like Japonica, which can be more of a place name, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, so like
That's
Japonica, its origination comes from Japan. Or you'll see another one you'll see a lot is Chinensis, which
China.
is China, or Sibiricus,
Oh, yeah, but a couple from them.
right? Or Occidentalis is,
the
Occident
Americas?
for America.
Cool.
Oh, excellent.
So you'll see like, Camellia japonica
Right.
is a camellia that originated in Japan, because France did japonica.
We are
Which-
just such nerds, aren't
Yeah.
And,
Would
and
you have
then you
different-
throw in like alba into that, like
Yeah.
we
Right.
talked about the
So
color,
it's a
or the
white
rubra,
flower.
right? But
And
that's also-
sometimes that can tell you when the plant's blooming. It within that family, it could be different bloom times,
Yeah.
right, within that genus. So what about like Nana and
right. So there are also some common names that can be descriptors of its habit. So like columnaris would be columnar, so very
Very narrow.
upright growing,
Uh-huh.
or reptans is more creeping and sprawling. So you'll see those a lot. And then like a nana would be like a characteristic that would be more compact and small, or gigantea. Obviously giant meaning it's something's going to get
Right.
big, be it the habit or a leaf or something like that.
When you think about it and the enormity of it, over 300 years or whatever, that this has been going on, it's just pretty cool that it's still meaningful and it's still understandable.
So you did it from the retail and the grower,
Right.
and as a retailer, you've run into it. Is there a level of frustration?
Oh, for sure.
All the way around, from the grower side of it to the homeowner side of it, and everybody in between. It's frustrating.
Yeah. And but we all come down to it. It's like that's the rules that we play by, and so everything industry has rules, and so we all try to be as good as possible. We try to, I do all the tags for Al's, and so I really try to make sure that I have the up-to-date name. If things change, I put it in parentheses, and so we're educating our customers.
Right.
So.
And at the same time, as retailers and wholesalers, we're mindful of the consumer.
Yeah.
We don't want to alienate them.
No, not at all.
We
Right.
don't want them to feel, like they're not educated. We want them to come in and to ask the questions.
Sure.
And so it does work both ways, because that's what, that's the fun name,
Yeah.
common names that are bringing them in, looking for these plants and generating the hype that you see in the social medias and the magazines. But then at the same time, they'll come in and we want to say, okay, this
Right.
is, yes, that's a great plant. Here's another name it could go by also.
Not just tequila
Right.
sunrise.
Yeah. So since we're talking about names, we're going to take a break now and listen from our friends at Capital Subaru in Salem. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the goofy names that are out there and some of those common names, then where they came from, and maybe even a one or two that you've never heard of before that are not from this area. So we'll get to that in a second, and we'll be right back.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else in Oregon. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.
Welcome back to Garden Time. Today we're talking about what's in a name, and we just finished talking about Latin, why we use Latin as plant names. And now we're getting into more of the goofy common names, the funny names, and a lot of these have a tie to history. So sneezeweed, which was named because it made people sneeze. We
Right.
mentioned that one before. I'm looking at one now, butter and eggs. Which is common toad flax, and you can see by looking
It's
at the
descriptive,
Right.
yes, definitely.
the picture, it looks like butter and eggs. Is that where a lot of these goofy names come from?
Yeah, definitely. And I can think of another egg one is fried egg flower is the rhamnea, because the flower is a huge
yeah.
white flower with a yellow center. So people, they get kind of crazy and make funny names.
Yeah.
Well, like we talked about burning bush earlier, because
Yeah.
when it's
Yeah.
fire engine red, it looks like
Right.
it's on fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Easier to say than you want.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
So Ryan, do you have a couple there?
Yeah, there's a couple other names that are you find along the way, like bastard balm or bastard toad flax. So I don't know who's finding
mad.
these plants, but that's like
Somebody's angry that day.
there's cheeseweed.
That's a new one. I've never heard that
Yeah,
one.
that one's a malva, or corn cockle,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another one.
or pussy toes is another one that
And that's
Those are
just
cute,
because
though.
you'll see around because
it looks
Yeah.
like kitty cat toes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
because they're
does,
fuzzy.
and
yeah.
they're
Right.
fuzzy. It's
Yeah.
a cute one.
But I was looking at Sticky Willy, and so it says a plant that got its name because the seed pods are spiky, and it's almost like a Velcro. And so if you've ever walked through a field, you get these stuck to you. And I can see where this one
Right.
actually got its name from. So, mother-in-law's tongue. We were talking about indoor plants, and it's a long-leaf, spiky, sharp, I guess like a mother-in-law's tongue.
Right.
With the cutting comments. Though we all agree that we all, have great mother-in-laws. And, no
offense,
No
no.
offense to mother-in-laws out there,
Right.
but you can see where somebody thought this was a cool name.
Right.
And
But also goes by snake plant.
yeah.
Right. So you'll coming back to what we were talking about earlier, where you'll have a plant with multiple
Yeah.
different names that has just kind of evolved over time. It's like, well, no, I don't want to call it mother-in-law.
Right,
Is that
right.
what it looks more like a snake to me, and somebody calls it a snake plant, or
Sure. Yeah.
and then you get a lot of regionality like we talked about. So
Right.
what somebody talks about it up here may be totally different down in the south or
Right,
the
right.
northeast. But
Okay, and Judy,
Oh, let's see what else we got here. Mad Dog Skullcap, which is the Scullitaria is an herb, and so I don't know. I'd have to do more research on that if it's some kind of makes you crazy.
Right.
well, and we talked about so the color, what it looks like. I'm looking here at corpse flower.
Yeah, it's stinky.
And it smells like a
corpse.
dead
Dead
corpse,
body.
like a dead body. Who made that first association?
Right.
And this is like a large.
Oh, it's huge.
Was it Titan arum, which is a huge, almost like lily type bloom, but it gets to be like
20 feet.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
huge.
and it takes a while for it to bloom. It has to go through many years of growth before it will produce this bloom, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And after that, it just dies.
Right.
And yet the other name for it, corpse flower, I guess, because it just dies after it's done. So
Well, but it's pollinated too by flies, and so it's attracted because the fragrance
Got it.
is
Ah, yeah,
malodorous. It smells like dead meat, and so they come in, they lay their eggs. So,
yeah.
right.
so there's a method to the madness,
yeah.
right?
Skunk cabbage. We were talking about smell.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Everybody is familiar with skunk cabbage,
Right.
and if you've been in a wetland, you know that there's skunk cabbage around. And it's not an ugly plant.
No, I like. They're so
Yeah,
pretty. Yeah.
but it does have a fragrance
Yeah,
to
they're
it.
kinda
and-
stinky,
Yeah.
yeah.
What else do we have?
Let's see, cuckoo flower, a cardamine pratensis. What else we got there? Viper's bugloss.
Yeah. A shaggy soldier. Have you ever heard that
No,
name?
that's
we were talking
another
about this.
one.
There are some names that pop up, common names and unusual names. And what's the plant?
Galansoga quadriadata.
See, you
And
can
it's a
tell why
daisy.
people are going off of the common names, right? You can't pronounce
cannot
it.
pronounce it.
The
And it's a
Latin name,
daisy
so-
family plant, so it looks like little tiny daisies.
It looks like a weed that I used to pull
Yeah.
in Chicago
Yeah.
from at my mother's house.
And what Jan McNeilin brought up, the one weed that we all were kind of like giggling like we're in grade school again, and it was the nipplewort.
The nipplewort,
And
which
it's
is a
just a
horrible weed,
small little
yeah.
weed. It has little tiny seed heads, and it's like going, somebody came up with this name, and it's like, yeah, it's bizarre.
We were at a botanical garden not that long ago, and there was one called brazen hussy.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ranunculus.
Which is, it's a beautiful plant, nice burgundy foliage, but not sure where they would come up with the name of it, but I think it reseeds itself.
It does. I was going to say it's kind of aggressive, but
Got
it's
it.
so pretty.
Right.
But so a lot of these are common plants. But people have just kind of come up with different names for them. So how useful are they when customers come in and use them in the garden center? If I came in and said, what's a sausage tree, which is a tropical tree, has long vines that have almost like sausages, that
Right.
Yeah.
sausage-looking seed pods.
They're cool.
How is that useful at all?
Well, you have to get the cell phone out.
With the internet these days, it's
Yeah.
much more useful because you can
Yeah.
just do a little search on it,
Right.
and pops up with a few different probably options for what it is.
Right,
but-
right. Or years past, we'd have to just kind of ask a million questions. So
Right.
Yeah.
But I think now with social media, and you're seeing, at least I know, way more things that are popping up that you've never seen before.
Right.
So you're seeing pictures, and you're sort of seeing interest in a lot more
Oh, yeah.
plants that don't grow everywhere, and so
Right.
people find these cool things in some tropical foreign jungle
That's true,
somewhere, and like,
yeah.
oh, look at this cool thing. I
Can you
saw
get
it.
that?
I saw it on Pinterest or whatever
Right.
it is, and I'm like, I want that plant. Well, you've never heard of it.
Right,
Nobody
right.
grows it, but it's pretty cool.
So
cool
do
looking.
younger gardeners tend to go towards the Latin names? Because I know that my parents, they always used common names more than the Latin names
Right.
Yeah.
when they were talking about plants.
I've noticed that the new gardeners that are indoor gardeners, they really know the botanical names. Wow, they come in
Yeah.
and it's like, I am so sorry, I do not know that. I have to look it up, and then it's like, oh, I know that plant, but I know it by the common name. I've
Right.
never learned as many of the indoor plant names as the outdoors. I
Right.
just have much more experience with the outdoor ones. But man, they're pretty savvy
Yeah,
with the
and
indoor ones.
And I would agree. There was a long period there that common names were kind of, everybody was going by common names because nobody wanted to deal with a botanical name. it's almost like there's a little bit of a switch of, you know, the newer generation that's just getting into gardening. They're pretty passionate about it, and they really want to, you know, understand it, and they're studying it, and I think they like to know the information and like to know the botanical names of it.
Yep.
They
That's
are
good.
more interested in getting the correct plant the first
Right,
time, as
right.
opposed to one that looks kind of cute.
Right.
So some of the other names we were talking about, mousetail, and that one there, I think I've even heard of that one.
That's a cute one.
Yeah, and that is
It's an Asarum proboscideum, and it's a very low-growing Asarum, and the flowers are kind of brown, and they're very low-growing, and the end of the flower looks like a mouse
like
tail.
a mousetail. Yeah.
And you know, they're pollinated by slugs.
Yeah, which a lot of people
Really?
never even think
Right.
about slugs being pollinators, but that's one that, you know, it's taken its name from the bloom style, and so you know, coxcomb and some of those
Yeah,
others.
definitely.
Those were associated with animals that you'd probably see around the farm or whatever. We've seen a couple of flowers that named after corn, and we're like going, it looks absolutely nothing like corn.
Yeah.
We're not sure if it's the color or what.
Maybe
but
the foliage. They
yeah.
didn't even show the foliage, so maybe it's
you'll
the
see
foliage
things
of
like,
that
you know,
one.
like toad lilies and toad this, that, you know, spotted because
Right.
of the back of a toad has all the spots
Right,
on it.
right.
So, I
Or
think there's-
lungwort.
Yeah.
Lungwort is pulmonaria, which is a perennial, and so on the leaves, there's like these spots on it that look like lungs. That's what in the way back, hundreds of years ago, and they also thought it was an herb for lung diseases.
Yeah.
Because of course there's lungs shaped on the leaves, but it is not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they thought it was. So.
So I think, you know, a lot of it comes down to, you know, it was a descriptive
Yes.
way of, you know, people that you didn't know the Latin name, so you're just trying to describe whatever it is. So like a
Right.
sausage tree because it looks like a big sausage, or you know,
Yeah.
peanut butter tree, like
Yeah.
Right. Oh,
clari-
yeah,
claridendron.
yeah.
You know, you rub the leaf and it smells like peanut butter.
Right.
So it was a descriptive thing to kind of, instead of saying a mottled leaf spots, it's like,
Right.
well, that toad-looking thing, right?
Right,
And
Well,
like-
and
right.
those we had a claridendron, and the neighbor kids, they knew it as the peanut butter tree, just
Right.
because whenever they came by, we would take a leaf and crush it, and it does smell like fresh peanut butter, and so that's what the name they became accustomed to. Maybe as they get older, they would, you know, find out the true name of it, but they knew it as the peanut butter tree, and they could take it to a garden center as they got older, saying, I remember this tree when I was growing
Right.
up.
Right.
And most garden centers would know exactly what they were talking
Yeah.
about. So,
That's
so,
common.
sometimes these goofy names do work.
They
So-
do. They stick.
But now you kind of see some of the goofy names coming in that are like, you know, some of the echinacea series that came out, like, you know, tomato soup,
Right.
Yeah.
or
Right.
mac and cheese,
Right.
or, you know, it's a descriptive of the color of
color.
the flower more
Right.
than it is of really anything else to do with it,
Yeah.
to do with the plant.
Yeah.
So it's
You know-
playing off those fun goofy names.
I don't know too many breeders, but I think the breeders know it takes like a long time to get a plant to market. So I think that they just kind of get crazy because they've spent 8 years of their life.
Right. I've
breeding.
bred, you know, 300 different heucheras or whatever
Right,
it is.
right.
I need to come up with some names, and I've run out of names, and I can't use the same thing as somebody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, you know, you can't just make up a name.
No,
There-
right.
it has to be unique.
Well,
Right.
Schreiner's iris, one of the biggest producers of irises here in the United States, is just here in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. And they posted on Facebook, name these varieties.
Oh,
and they did a
fun.
little contest. And I think sometimes growers and breeders will do that to try to get a little bit more unique names out there.
Right.
And to kind of see what the, you know, public wants. I mean, Swan Island Dahlias is also here.
Yeah.
Yet again, another large grower breeder in the United States. And they grow like in their seed field
Oh, so
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Right.
And by the time you narrow it down, there's like 12 varieties that come out every year. How do you name those varieties?
Right.
You have to come up, of course, obviously with a Latin name, but beyond that, now you're like, what do you call this?
Right.
And so now you get like, you know, Gitz attention because it's named for the Gitz family,
Right.
that kind of thing. So, and those are kind of cute, but it's that naming thing that can be really overwhelming. So,
Well, and it's so nice. Both of those companies have named flowers, an iris and a dahlia, after garden time.
Yes,
Which is so
yes.
nice,
Right.
and it's great to have that, and we have them in our gardens, and It's
Yeah.
really a really nice tribute to
Yeah.
the
And if
show.
you go to gardentime.tv, we will link you to those growers, and you can actually buy an iris and a rose and
Daylily.
a dahlia.
Dahlia, excuse me.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
dahlia. We'll work on daylily. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, or peonies.
Anybody out there? Yeah, peonies, that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing. So I'm looking here, and there's a list of animal names. Bird flower, zebra plant. These look like they're more in line with the bloom style,
Mm-hmm.
what the bloom looks
Right.
like. The bird plant looks like a little hummingbird.
It does.
Yeah.
It's so pretty.
The zebra plant, a lot of lines in the variegation
Yeah.
that look like the coat of a zebra. Is that more of a simple way that people were able to remember plants?
I
It's like
think
going,
so, yeah.
it's that zebra thing. Yeah, it's
Right,
not the,
Right.
the
yeah.
line.
Or
It's
like
not the
this
variegata.
anaxanthes kangaroo paws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, another little cute animal looks like a little kangaroo paw.
It is, and they're so fuzzy,
Fuzzy.
and cute, though. They're really a nice, and for us, it's an annual, but
Yeah.
it's a really neat one.
Yeah. Ponytail, monkey monstera.
And see, now I know that is Swiss cheese plant.
Yeah. Which is
So-
what we just talked about. And so it's essentially what we
Right.
talked about with the indoor plant segment with George a couple weeks ago. It's just somebody else came up with a different name
Right.
for it.
Right.
And I don't know why monkey,
I don't know monkey.
because
yeah.
maybe it's a climber.
Oh, it is. That's true. Yeah, maybe
because
that's it.
yeah,
Grows up in the trees in the
Right.
rainforest where the
Right.
monkeys are up in the
That's true.
thing.
bird of paradise, which I think a lot of people, if you've been to Hawaii or you've been to the tropics, you've seen this. This is a very iconic flower. It's funny is that people look at it and they think it's like a goofy head of a bird, and the other ones look at it and it looks like a bird with its wings unfurled diving, because depending
yeah.
on how you look
Yeah.
at it, and there really is no wrong way of looking at it, but it is very iconic. It's
Yeah, they're
usually
beautiful.
bright.
And very, very descriptive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you see paradise, you see it in all the tropical warm areas, and it looks like a
Right.
bird
Yep.
blooming on the end of it.
Yep.
Cobra lily, we've talked about that in the past, just because of the shape of the bloom itself. Looks like the hood of a cobra.
Right.
I'm looking at unicorn plant, and I'm like going, okay,
I don't. Yeah.
yeah. But you sit there and you look at it, and you can say, okay, I can see where some of these got their
Right.
names, especially the animal ones.
Right.
It's the other common names that the corn
Yeah,
flower and some of
right.
those that you just don't know. So, what has been the weirdest name? And there are some that are really not
Right,
appropriate. So,
This is a family show,
Yeah.
Jeff.
I know.
Email us and we'll tell you.
Yeah, there are some, and you think, okay, the breeder was being very, very
Right,
funny when
right.
they
Right.
did this. But there are some that are just really inappropriate.
Right. Oh,
They-
yeah,
They
definitely.
resemble a body part or something.
Yeah.
and
Yes,
yeah,
they,
so-
they,
sure,
they do,
yeah.
and that's getting back down to your descriptive what it looks like.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
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 That's, I
But-
think all the
And we're on
filters
board.
might be off.
But as a grower retailer and as a retailer, has there been one or a name that you may have noticed in the past that isn't commonly used? We talked about butterfly bush.
Right.
Is there ones that are not being used anymore?
or ones as we there's a house plant comes to mind is like a wandering Jew,
Oh, not a
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
So that's been around forever, and so you start looking at names like that now, and it's like, is that really what that
Right.
plant needs to be called?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and I think there's kind of a push now that a lot of people have taken it upon themselves to change the names. I think you've done the
Yeah.
same, here at Al's, but it's you're trying to be sensitive to your clientele and what's appropriate in
Right.
the day and age.
Which
So-
may have been appropriate or cute
Accepted, yeah.
Right.
years ago,
Right.
is no longer.
Right.
Moses in a boat probably
Moses
still
in a boat. Yeah.
Right.
is still probably good, but
Right.
But yeah, you're right. You don't want to offend the
No,
customer.
right.
Right.
And-
But I don't think there's an overall arching plant naming community that's going to put in the scientists aren't in the lab coming up with names for this that are going to go change that and make some
Right.
new
No,
publication.
right.
So that falls back onto growers and retailers in their naming.
Right, right.
Where that comes down to.
Right. Well, so I've known Wandering Jew for 30 years or so, and so I finally said I'm going to change it for us in house, and so I'm calling it Wandering Dude, because it's a very flowing plant and
Right.
hanging plant, so it kind of is still descriptive and it's fun
Right.
You can
Or the
call it
Wanderer.
or the Wanderer, right,
I mean,
right.
it's,
But Wandering Dude, that's cute.
It's kind
Yeah.
of cute.
Yeah.
I was in
Yeah.
a funny mood that day.
right, but that comes back
yeah.
to, kind of picking a name and,
Right.
Yeah.
and running with it.
Cool.
I think we talked about Busy Lizzie.
Busy Lizzie's. Anybody know what that is? I mean, I would never
I
have
do.
known what that is.
Impatience.
Impatience. And had
yeah.
you known that?
I did know that because my grandmother used to call them
So
Busy
maybe
Lizzies.
that's a Northwest thing, because I was new to the area from Chicago, and it was like, I'm so sorry, I do not know what you're talking about. Didn't have a cell phone to look it up,
Yeah.
and I think we were walking in the nursery, and they found him on the table, and it's like, that's it, and it's like, oh my gosh, impatience.
Right?
But even as much knowledge as we have of plants, and you guys especially, we all have plant apps on our phones. And so there are times when we've gone somewhere and it's like, especially on these garden time tours, and you see these plants, it's like, I have no idea what this is. And you take a picture of it,
Right.
and you can compare, leaf structure, bloom structure, stems, bark, and
Yeah.
it will get you in the ballpark where you can actually get the names.
Right.
So even if you don't have a plant knowledge, if you don't have a knowledge base, just taking the picture sometimes will get you kind of in the right realm if you have one of those apps on your phone. So
Yeah.
Because you figure,
It's really
how
good.
many hundreds of thousands of millions of different plants are there scattered across the
Right.
world, and
Yeah.
trying to
Right.
categorize and make them all unique and come up with one system to do that and one naming convention. A little difficult.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
and if you do bring it in, what's the number one complaint in garden centers? Fuzzy pictures.
Oh my.
And please, you're going to bring a picture into your garden center. Tight shot of the bloom, tight shot of the leaf, wide shot of the plant.
The overall structure of
Yeah,
it.
this
just-
overall structure, is as opposed to, trying to describe it, you can actually show them the pictures, make
Right.
sure they're all in focus,
Right.
and that will go a long way to helping you find that plant in the garden center.
Yeah.
Um,
Fun.
Guys, that was kind of fun. I just thought this was going to be a little dry.
No, it was really fun.
Talking about Latin and common names, but I think this has been very helpful, and especially for people who are listening and watching. You will be able to go into the garden center now, because there is no stupid question when you come in. You bring in the common name however you want to call it. We're pretty sure that anybody in the garden industry will help you out. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, this was fun. It was a great,
fun,
great subject.
We thank once again Capital Subaru in Salem, Oregon for being our sponsor. And, go and see your local garden center. Find what you love on the shelves. Don't matter, change the name if you want. Name it and become a plant parent?
A plant parent.
That's right.
And you can
Yep.
you can name it and it'll become a child of your family.
There
So
you go.
thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time, and happy gardening.
At Capital Subaru, we value your time, whether you're here for service or working with our amazing sales team. Everything is right here for your convenience. We offer a great selection of Subarus, an industry-leading service center that keeps you moving, and so much more. Like our living green wall, just one of the many features throughout our dealership. Looking for the perfect pet gift? Check out Happy Paws Pet Shop right here in our lobby. Or plan your next adventure in our fireside seating and find your happy place. It's always your time at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.